When a guy hears you moan, the very first thing that happens in his mind is this surge of validation. It's like a light switch that flicks on inside of him saying, yes, I'm wanted. Yes, I'm desired. You have to understand, for most men, attraction isn't something they're constantly reassured about. They don't wake up every morning feeling sexy or irresistible. In fact, many men walk through life with way more insecurities than they let on. So when that sound escapes you, it doesn't just stay in the room. It hits something deeper. It tells him that in this moment, out of every person in the world, you want him. And that's a powerful drug. Think about it. Men spend a lot of time wondering whether they measure up, not just physically, but emotionally, financially, even socially. They wonder if they're strong enough, confident enough, successful enough. That doubt creeps in quietly, even in the most confident-looking guy. So when you moan, it cuts through all of that noise. It silences those questions with a very clear answer. You are enough right here, right now. It's one of the rare moments where his brain doesn't need to run through a checklist of whether he's doing life correctly. The sound tells him that he's doing this moment correctly, and that reassurance is addictive. Now, here's the interesting part. It's not just about sex. It's about being chosen. For a man, hearing you moan is like receiving proof that he's the one creating this reaction in you. It's not an accident. It's not generic. It's you responding to him. And men, even the most casual ones, are deeply wired to crave that sense of being the cause of your pleasure. That validation says, you're not just here, you're making an impact. It transforms what could be a purely physical act into something that feeds his identity. This is also why moaning often makes a guy feel instantly closer to you. Because it's not just about the sound, it's about what the sound communicates. Without words, you're telling him that he has access to a part of you that isn't available to everyone. It makes him feel chosen in the most primal way. And that matters because men live in a world where they're often expected to chase, to prove themselves, to compete for attention. Your moan, in that instant, removes the competition. It's like handing him a medal that says, you win. You're the one I want right now. Of course, this validation can come with its own risks. If a guy becomes addicted only to the sound rather than the connection behind it, he might start chasing that reaction like a performer chasing applause. But in the healthiest moments, when the moan is genuine, it works like a mirror. It reflects back to him his deepest desire to be wanted, appreciated, and powerful in your eyes. That's why even the most stoic, quiet, unemotional guy can suddenly feel transformed when he hears it. It reaches past the surface and touches something raw inside him. And you'll notice this too when a man feels validated, when he feels your desire through that sound, it changes the way he shows up with you. He becomes more attentive, more engaged, more passionate. Because now he isn't just in his head trying to perform, he's fueled by the certainty that you're with him, responding to him, wanting him. That energy loop makes the moment better for both of you, and that's the real magic of it. So, the first thought running through a guy's mind when you moan isn't as shallow as you might think. Sure, there's arousal, there's excitement, but beneath that, there's relief. There's that quiet voice inside him saying, I matter here, I'm enough. And when a man feels that, it doesn't just light up his body, it lights up his whole sense of being wanted. When a guy hears you moan, another thing it does inside of him is boost his masculinity. It's not just about pleasure, it's about identity. Men are wired to measure themselves against this unspoken standard of strength, ability, and impact. From the time they're young, they're taught, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, that being a man means being capable, being competent, being in control. So, when you moan, it feeds straight into that part of him that craves evidence he's living up to that role. It tells him he's not just present, he's performing, he's delivering, and in that moment, his ego feels 10 feet taller. You have to realize men don't get that kind of affirmation very often. Women might receive compliments on their beauty, style, or energy more frequently, but men rarely hear direct feedback about their masculinity in ways that feel meaningful. That's why the sound of your moan is such a powerful signal. It communicates in a way words often can't. It says, "You're strong, you're capable, you're doing something that only a man who knows what he's doing could make me feel." And that message is intoxicating. It turns the experience into more than just physical gratification. It becomes a validation of his identity. That's why many men get bolder, more confident, even more adventurous the moment they hear it. It's like gasoline thrown on a fire. When he hears that sound, it confirms to him that he's not just meeting expectations, he's exceeding them. It's not hard to see why that strokes his ego. He feels powerful, he feels competent, he feels like he's making his mark. And that's not arrogance, that's simply how male psychology works. To feel masculine is to feel effective, and your moan is the evidence he's effective. But here's what's fascinating, this doesn't just stay confined to the bedroom. That boost to his masculinity can spill over into other areas of how he relates to you. He may become more affectionate, more protective, or more invested in making you happy because that moment gave him a taste of what it feels like to succeed with you. It's like unlocking a level of confidence that motivates him to keep showing up in the right way. And often, men who feel that kind of affirmation from their partner will chase it outside the bedroom too. They'll try harder, they'll put in more effort, because deep down every man wants to feel like he's enough for the woman he desires. Of course, the danger here is that if he becomes too reliant on it, he might start seeing your moan as a scoreboard rather than a natural expression. That's where insecurity can creep back in. If the moan doesn't come, he may begin to wonder if he's lost his touch, if he's not strong enough, if his masculinity is slipping. But when it's genuine, when it's real, that sound gives him a sense of certainty that is hard to find anywhere else. It quiets that fear of inadequacy and lets him stand tall, at least for a moment, in the belief that he is the man he wants to be in your eyes. And here's the deeper truth. Men don't want to just feel like men. They want to feel like your man. The sound of your moan personalizes his masculinity. It's not just about being masculine in a general sense. It's about being masculine for you, about being the one who draws that reaction out of you. That's why it's so powerful. It doesn't just stroke his ego, it anchors his ego to you. It ties his sense of power, skill, and competence directly to the connection you're sharing. So when a guy hears you moan, yes, he feels desire, yes, he feels validated, but layered into that is this huge boost to his sense of masculinity. It tells him he's living up to the role he secretly wonders about all the time. It tells him that in your world, in that moment, he's not just a man, he's the man. And when he feels that, the connection between you becomes something far more electric than either of you could create by words alone. When a guy hears you moan, it's easy to think his mind only goes to ego, power, or performance. But what often gets overlooked is how much it ties into emotional connection. For a lot of men, that sound isn't just about the act itself. It's about closeness. It's about feeling like the wall between you and him has come down, and for a moment, you're both fully present, fully vulnerable, and completely in it together. That intimacy is something men rarely get to feel in their everyday lives, because most of the time they're taught to put on armor, to be strong, to not show too much softness. But in that moment, when he hears you moan, it hits him differently. It's a reminder that he's not just touching your body, he's reaching you emotionally. This is something a lot of men crave, but don't always know how to ask for. They won't necessarily say, "I want to feel closer to you," because for some, that sounds too vulnerable. Instead, they look for signals, and when you moan, it becomes one of those signals. It tells him, without needing a single word, that you're not just going through the motions. You're engaged, you're invested, you're opening up to him. That sound becomes a bridge between two people. It reassures him that what's happening is not just a physical exchange, but an emotional one. That's why the intensity of your response can stick with him long after the moment is over. Men might not always talk about it, but they remember. They carry it with them because it made them feel like they weren't alone in the experience. It's not just about what they're doing, but who they're doing it with. And the moan reinforces that it's with someone who's connected, who's not holding back. It tells him he's not the only one invested in the intimacy, that you're right there, feeling it with him. What's interesting is that this emotional connection can be even more powerful than the physical sensation itself. A man can chase pleasure anywhere, but connection is harder to find. When he hears you moan, it reassures him that this isn't transactional, it's not mechanical, it's not just a body next to his. It's you. Your sound, your presence, your response, and that's what makes it memorable. That's what makes him feel like he's sharing something unique with you. And it's why so many men interpret that sound as a sign of intimacy rather than just arousal. Now, here's where it goes deeper. That emotional connection makes him want to protect it. When a man feels that closeness, he doesn't just think about the moment, he thinks about how to keep it. He starts craving not only your body, but also the bond that comes with your openness. It can make him more attentive, more thoughtful, even outside the bedroom, because he realizes he has access to something rare, your vulnerability. And vulnerability, when it's real, creates attachment. It makes him feel like you're letting him into a part of yourself that not everyone gets to see or hear. And of course, that's why fake moaning can backfire. If a guy senses it's not genuine, it breaks that emotional link. Instead of feeling connection, he feels distance, like he's being managed rather than invited in. But when it's real, when it's natural, the moan becomes one of the most honest forms of communication between two people. It's raw, it's unpolished, and that's exactly why it feels authentic. That authenticity is what forges the bond, because it tells him you're not just letting him into your body, you're letting him into your truth. So yes, when a guy hears you moan, he might feel validated, he might feel masculine, but deeper than that, he often feels connected. It reassures him that there's more happening than physical movements. It's an emotional exchange that only works when both people are open. And in a world where men are constantly pressured to be guarded, to not expose their feelings, to never show too much softness, that sound becomes one of the rare moments where he gets to let go of all of that and simply feel close to you. That closeness is what makes the memory linger long after the moment has ended, because more than pleasure, what he'll remember is how deeply he felt connected to you. When a guy hears you moan, it can light him up with confidence, but at the same time, it can also trigger something very different, pressure. That sound doesn't always just tell him he's doing something right. Sometimes it plants a thought in his head. Can I keep this going? Can I live up to this? And in that instant, what was supposed to feel effortless suddenly comes with a weight. Because underneath his excitement is a question: what if it stops? What if she loses interest? What if I can't keep her in this place? Men carry this hidden scoreboard in their minds. They want to perform. They want to please. They want to be remembered as the guy who delivered an unforgettable experience. So when they hear you moan, it confirms they're winning, but it also raises the stakes. Now the bar is set and the pressure is on to stay at that level or go even higher. And if he starts thinking too much about performance, he can slip out of the moment. Instead of being fully present with you, his brain starts racing through a list of doubts. Am I going too fast? Too slow? Should I switch things up? Did that last move feel as good to her as it did to me? That inner dialogue can become louder than the connection he's actually sharing. And here's the irony: the moan that was meant to excite him can sometimes intimidate him. It's like giving a performer a standing ovation in the middle of the show. It feels amazing, but now he feels he has to live up to the applause. The joy of the moment can get replaced with the pressure to sustain it. For some men, that pressure can actually make them retreat a little, or worse, in disconnect emotionally. Instead of feeling close, they get caught in their own head, focused more on avoiding failure than enjoying intimacy. This is where a man's ego and vulnerability collide, because the truth is most men are terrified of not being enough. They won't say it, they won't admit it, but deep down, that's the fear. So when they hear you moan, it's like a spotlight shining on them. And while part of them loves the recognition, another part fears what happens if they can't keep earning it. Will the sound fade? Will you lose interest? Will he fall short in your eyes? That fear can make him tense, and tension is the enemy of genuine connection. But here's the flip side. This pressure, if handled well, can push a man to rise to the moment. It can make him pay more attention, listen more closely to your body, tune into the rhythm between you instead of just his own instincts. Some men use that pressure as fuel, letting it drive them to be more giving, more creative, more invested in your pleasure. For them, the moan isn't just a challenge, it's an invitation to step up. And when he does, the bond between you deepens, because he's not just chasing his own satisfaction, he's chasing the experience of making you feel amazing. The key difference is whether the moan makes him feel supported or judged. If it feels genuine, if it feels connected, then even when the pressure creeps in, he interprets it as motivation. But if it feels performative or exaggerated or disconnected from reality, it can amplify his insecurities. He starts wondering if it's real, if you're pretending, if you're just trying to boost his ego without meaning it. And that doubt can unravel him faster than silence ever could. So yes, moaning can empower a guy, it can validate him, it can connect him to you, but it can also create a layer of pressure he rarely admits out loud. It can make him overthink, second guess, and feel like he's being tested in real time. The sound that excites him can just as easily weigh on him, because behind every confident exterior is the question every man secretly asks, am I really enough for her? And when that question gets louder than the moment, he risks missing out on the very connection the moan was meant to celebrate. When a guy hears you moan, it doesn't just stay in his ears. It sets his imagination on fire. Men are highly visual and auditory creatures, and the moment that sound escapes you, it paints pictures in his mind that make the whole experience bigger than what's happening in front of him. It's not just a noise, it's fuel for fantasy. He starts imagining what you're feeling, how much you're enjoying it, what it looks like through your eyes. The moan takes him out of his own body and throws him into a world where everything feels heightened, more intense, more primal. That's why moaning can amplify a moment so dramatically. It's not simply about hearing pleasure, it's about the story his brain creates around that pleasure. In his head, that sound means you're losing control, you're surrendering to the experience, and he's the one who brought you there. And that idea alone can make him feel like the world has disappeared and nothing else matters except the two of you. The moan becomes the soundtrack to his fantasy, and fantasies are powerful because they don't just excite the body, they excite the mind. And here's where it gets interesting. Your moan doesn't just reflect reality, it shapes it. The more vividly he imagines what you're feeling, the more invested he becomes in making it true. He wants the fantasy to match reality. If his mind interprets your moan as total ecstasy, he starts chasing that vision, trying to keep you in that state, trying to create more of those moments. In a way, your sound becomes a script, and he becomes both actor and director, doing everything he can to keep the scene alive. That's why moaning often leads men to push boundaries, experiment more, or become more passionate. It gives their imagination permission to run free. For many men, that sound is also deeply primal. It connects them to something animalistic, something beyond words or thought. In a world where men are constantly expected to be logical, controlled, and composed, hearing you moan taps into a side of him that doesn't have to think. It only has to feel. And that unleashes fantasies that are less about control and more about raw, unfiltered passion. It's the difference between performing and surrendering, and that surrender can feel just as powerful for him as it does for you. But there's another layer to this too. Sometimes the fantasy extends beyond the bedroom. That sound gets imprinted in his memory. Long after the moment is over, he can replay it in his mind. It becomes part of his private highlight reel, something he can call on to relive the connection you shared. It's why men can sometimes seem almost addicted to the sound. It's not just a turn on, it's a mental keepsake. It's proof of intimacy, of passion, of a time when you were completely immersed in each other. And that replay value is part of why moaning carries so much weight in his psyche. Of course, with fantasy comes the risk of misinterpretation. If he imagines too much, he might project things onto you that aren't really there. He may think you're feeling one way when in reality you're not. That's why authenticity matters so much. A real moan doesn't just ignite fantasy, it aligns it with truth. When the sound is genuine, it doesn't just feed his imagination, it deepens his connection to reality. Because now he knows his fantasy isn't just in his head, you're right there with him, living it out. So when a guy hears you moan, yes, it excites him, yes, it validates him, but it also transports him into a richer, more vivid experience. It magnifies the moment, turns physical touch into an entire world inside his mind, and makes him feel like he's not just part of an act, he's part of something extraordinary. The moan creates a space where fantasy and reality blur together, and in that space, everything feels bigger, hotter, and more unforgettable. And that's why, for so many men, that sound isn't just noise. It's the heartbeat of their imagination. When a guy hears you moan, there's always that flash of excitement, that surge of confidence, that rush of intimacy. But then, almost in the same breath, another thought can creep in. Is this real? That's the hidden question a lot of men wrestle with, even if they never say it out loud. Because as much as a moan can light him up, it can also confuse him if he's not sure about its authenticity. And that uncertainty can sit in the back of his mind, quietly shaping how he feels about the whole experience. Men are not as oblivious as they sometimes look. They notice tone, timing, intensity. They notice when something feels organic versus when it feels a little too rehearsed. And while part of them desperately wants to believe every sound is genuine, another part wonders if it's for them or for you, or worse, if it's for the sake of ending the moment quickly. That doubt can be unsettling because the very thing that was supposed to reassure him suddenly becomes a question mark. Instead of thinking, I'm making her feel amazing, he starts wondering, is she just making me think I am? This confusion is powerful because it strikes at the core of a man's desire to feel enough. Remember, the moan is supposed to validate him, to feed his masculinity, to connect him emotionally, to fuel his fantasy. But if he suspects it isn't real, all of that comes crashing down. The validation feels hollow, the masculinity feels fragile, the connection feels staged, and the fantasy collapses. What was once intoxicating suddenly feels like smoke and mirrors, and that can hit harder than silence, because silence leaves space for interpretation, but a fake moan feels like a lie. Now, here's the paradox. Most men don't want to call it out. They'd rather go along with the illusion than confront the possibility that it's not real. Why? Because confronting it risks rejection. If he asks, was that genuine? He's putting himself in the most vulnerable position possible, and many men fear that answer more than anything else. So instead, they hold on to the confusion, pretend they didn't notice, and let it eat away at them quietly. The danger is, over time, that doubt can create distance. It can make him less confident, less bold, less present, because deep down he doesn't fully trust the signals anymore. But when the moan is genuine, when it comes naturally, the confusion dissolves, and what's left is trust. That's why authenticity matters so much. A real moan doesn't just sound different, it feels different. It lines up with the rhythm of the moment, with the energy between you with the rawness of what's happening. And when he feels that alignment, there's no confusion, only certainty. That certainty is what allows him to relax, to let go of performance, to stop overthinking and simply connect. This is also why subtlety often matters more than volume. A quiet, natural response can feel far more convincing than an over-the-top performance. Men aren't necessarily looking for theatrics, they're looking for signs of truth. Even a soft sigh that feels real will carry more weight than the loudest sound if it comes across as genuine. What he wants most is not to be impressed, but to be believed. He wants to trust that the moment he's sharing with you is authentic, because only then can he fully surrender to it. So when a guy hears you moan, he might smile, he might feel proud, he might imagine 100 fantasies, but somewhere in that mix, there's often the quiet question of authenticity, and how he interprets the answer in his own mind can change everything. If he believes it's real, the moan becomes one of the most powerful forms of intimacy between you. If he doubts it, the very same sound can become a source of insecurity. That's the double edge of it. It has the power to make him feel like the most desired man in the world or the most deceived. And at the end of the day, what men want more than perfect performance is honesty, because honesty creates trust, and trust is what transforms a moment of pleasure into a memory of connection. So while the moan excites him, what he's really hoping for underneath it all is that it's coming from a place of truth. And when it does, it doesn't just excite his body, it calms his mind, anchors his heart, and makes the intimacy unforgettable.